So today we're going to talk about one of the most important aspects of real estate called title. Because what's property ownership without title, right? And I have a guest speaker with me today, Mark Manwaring of Ticor Title, and he's been my title rep for over 10 years. So welcome, Mark. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nancy. Hello, everyone. And it's been a treat to work with you, and I think you're going to ask some questions about some of the, what is title insurance, what do we do, what are some of the issues, and I think I'm starting my 23rd year in the business and probably been involved in 35,000 different transactions from residential, commercial, so we see kind of what's going on out there.
Yeah, we love that you have tons of experience and bring that to the table. So first question is, what is title insurance?
It's a good question. We get this a lot. I'd say the best way to explain it, title insurance is different than most forms of insurance. More people are familiar with medical or auto insurance where you pay every year, you pay every month in some cases. Title insurance is a one-time cost or a fee that on a purchase transaction, when you have a buyer, the title insurance is protecting the buyer for as long as they own the property. 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, but it's designed to protect against any defects in the past. So essentially, it's almost like wiping a slate clean when a buyer's buying a property, that the seller and any previous owners, that they had the right to sell the property and there's no issues, liens, or judgments to where somebody could come out of the woodworks 5-6 years later and attack the title. So that's essentially what title insurance is.
Okay, so now that we know what title insurance is, it protects the buyer from any defects in title
in the
from
past.
the past. Okay.
And we also insure lenders. So when most transaction, a buyer's getting a loan, and the lender requires title insurance on the loan they're making to the buyer.
Excellent. And then also what comes up when we're selling property is that the buyer who comes in, we're asked to ask them, how would you like to hold title?
Right. Yeah.
Right? And oftentimes we say, you need to consult your lawyer about that, but what can you tell us about?
Yeah, so there's different ways to hold title to real property. You can hold title individually. You can hold, one of the more common ones we see with husband and wife, it's called joint tenants. And joint tenancy implies equal ownership, and there's a right of survivorship. So if something were to happen to somebody, the interest automatically passes to the spouse, and you don't end up in court doing what's called a probate. Maybe we'll get into that a little later. There's another form called tenants in common. That does not have a right of survivorship, but you have the ability to say person A owns 82% of the property, person B owns 18% of the property. So if one of the parties passes, it's not going to the other. You can also hold title in a trust, an LLC, a corporation, a partnership. So title is held differently if you're been married or you're divorced. So there's all these little nuances that when you purchase a property, you have to declare how you're going to hold title, but you also have the flexibility as you own a property to change your title. But a lot of people don't understand the nuances of what it means, and more importantly, you kind of have to look at these as if something were to happen down the line and somebody were to pass away, is the property going to where the parties want to? If that makes sense.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, and when we're also in a transaction with somebody purchasing a property, something happens in the beginning where they get something called a preliminary title or prelim.
Yeah, so probably,
exactly?
so what the title, our job as a title company, it's usually, sometimes we're doing this work in advance before it goes into escrow. You might reach out to me and say, hey, I want to make sure everything is good to go. But once an escrow opens, usually the first step is the escrow company's contacting the title company, and we're doing a complete search of the property. And we deliver a product called a preliminary title report, which is going to essentially show the ownership. It's going to show tax status, property taxes. Are they due? Do they need to be paid? Are they delinquent? We are going to show any open mortgages. We're also going to show what's called an easement. If a property, let's say a house has power lines in the back, there might be a Southern California Edison easement, meaning if the power line breaks, they have the right to come on the rear 6 feet of your property. We're also going to show CC&Rs. We're going to show all types of stuff. What most people don't know is we also search people's names, because there are types of liens and judgments that can attach to somebody's name, which then subsequently could attach to the property. So this product we deliver, it's kind of the roadmap of the transaction, right? So if the house is going to sell, these are all the things that are showing on the title, and we're also going to outline what our requirements are. And those are going to vary if a property's in a trust, somebody's passed away, are we using a power of attorney. So we produce this report that's going to outline what we need from the seller to close, but it's also going to disclose to the buyer what's on the property. And then ultimately, as we get towards the end, we're paying off the debt and issuing a title policy. But that's kind of the first step, and the lender wants it, the buyer wants it, seller wants it. So that's kind of how we're involved at the beginning, and then we can get into some other things we do as well.
Great. It sounds very detailed, and everything is looked at to ensure that the buyer gets clear title.
Yeah, and ultimately us as the title company, we're issuing the insurance. So it's in our best interest that the search is exhaustive, detailed, because if a mistake is made or there's an issue, depending on what it is, ultimately we have liability. And that's why people want title insurance, or it's pretty much a norm on any commercial residential purchase, because they want to insure, usually a house is one of the biggest investments people make, and to have a one-time product that's going to ensure that there's no issues from the past, people are looking for that security, and so are lenders.
Absolutely. So given that it's a product that we definitely want to have and need to have in most situations, who pays for this?
Good question. So it can vary, I think, in other parts of the country, but typically, let's use an example of somebody selling a house for $800,000, and let's use an example, a buyer's getting a loan for $600,000. We actually issue two title policies. One is what's called an owner's policy that protects the buyer as long as they own the property, and the second is called a lender's policy that the lender wants. And we can get into why they want that if you want in a moment. But typically, the seller pays for the owner's policy. That is based on the sales price of the home. The buyer pays the lender's policy, which is not based on the sales price of the home. It's based on the actual loan amount. So in that rough example, if I were to give you a kind of on an $800,000 house, it's approximately $2,200 for the owner's policy, and the lender's policy is probably around $1,100. And if we had a cash purchase where there wasn't a loan, there would be no need for a lender's policy. So I guess everything's negotiable in a contract, but I'd say 99% of the time on residential purchases, that's the structure. And sometimes the seller goes, hey, I don't want to pay for it. But if you actually look at it, I can almost guarantee you when they bought the property 5 or 10 years ago, whatever the number, the seller in that transaction paid for the owner's policy. So that's kind of how it works. And our pricing is fixed. It's filed with the Department of Insurance. We don't wet thumb. And just to give you an example, for our pricing is in $10,000 increments. So $800,000 house, like from $790 to $800 is one price, $800 to $810. And usually for every $10,000 of value of the property, the increase in title insurance is about $15.
Okay, and that's set? It's the same in all
we
title
have filed.
companies?
There's slight variances, but for the most part, everything is really, really close, very close, within 1 or 2%.
Good to know.
Yeah.
And for that, what else does title do other than provide this insurance and protect the buyer and the seller?
I would say one thing that most buyers and sellers might not be aware of, when you're buying and selling a property, most of your interactions with your agent, right? Negotiating an offer, getting accepted. And then a lot of your activity might be with the escrow company, right? And the escrow company is kind of the neutral third party that follows the contract and so forth. But a lot of people might not be aware that, outside of searching the property to show the condition of title and what we need, if somebody's getting a loan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, make up the lender, most people don't know that the lender funds into the title company. They want the money coming to us. So we receive not the deposit, the main chunk of the loan, and then what a lot of people don't know is the title company pays off all the debt that's secured against the property taxes, mortgages, HELOCs, could be a judgment for the Nordstrom's credit card they didn't pay. So our job is to search the property, receive the money. We take instruction from the escrow company, but we make all the payoffs. We also record all the documents, the deeds that transfer title from buyer to seller. We pay the transfer tax that the county charges. So we're kind of this spoke of the wheel. We're kind of in the middle. We're paying off lenders, receiving money, recording documents, and then ultimately when a transaction's closed, we send all the proceeds back to the escrow, who then divvies up the appropriate costs and ultimately gives a check or wires the seller their proceeds. But most people don't know that we do a lot of that.
Actually, I thought escrow did all those things.
Yeah, we work with escrow. They're our
Right.
partner. But in terms of searching, recording, making payoffs, recording documents, and then the last thing we do, we issue a title policy that's protecting the lender or the buyer for as long as they own the property. So
Yeah, so it sounds like you're doing the background legal work to legally transfer the title from party A to party
Yeah.
B.
And sometimes they're easy, right? Somebody's owned a property 2 years and it's pretty clean, and then we get deals all the time that grandma bought it in 1942 and it stayed in the family, and there's been 25 transfers and 50 loans, and we got to make sure it goes from A to B to C, and then, depending on who's alive and who's selling the property, I think we're going to get into maybe another question about that.
I was just going to talk about that. So what we're seeing in today's market with an aging population, we're seeing a lot of people that are going through exactly that. So sometimes they're aging in place, and they might have made a lot of non-purchase loans throughout the history of owning a property for, say, 50, 60 years, just to pay for in-home care, all sorts of things. Then one of the owners might pass away.
Yeah.
One of the owners might go into a nursing home. One of the owners might become incompetent due to dementia or Alzheimer's.
Right.
And that's why I tend to go to you with title, for title, because you're so experienced in all these different aspects. So can you share a little bit about
Yeah, I mean, I would just say in this market right now, a vast majority of the deals that we're doing, they tend to have a longer length of ownership, right? It's been in a family, it could be an inheritance, and a couple things happen when someone or a family's owned a property 20, 30, 40 years is a lot of times they've changed the title, and sometimes they've done things they don't know they're doing or have certain ramifications, adding people to title, removing people from title. But more of these properties are held in a trust. And a trust is not a public document. A deed into a trust is. So when if we're dealing with a deceased person on it, deceased trustee, if somebody resigns or becomes incapacitated, the title company needs to see the trust, because the trust is really the governing body of what the person wanted. And inside the trust, there's a couple things we look for. One, who's the successor trustee? If the original person who created the trust isn't here or incapable, we have to look at who the trust calls for to have the ability to borrow money or sell, in most cases, sell the property. And and when you start looking at the trust, you also notice who the beneficiaries are. Those are the people that are going to get parts of the proceeds or certain things within the trust. Sometimes those people are the same, sometimes they're different. So, we're kind of, in those situations, we're kind of like the referee. We have to go, okay, property wants to be sold, it's in a trust. Unfortunately, grandma passed away. This is what we need, and this is going to determine this and that. But we're running into issues with old loans that were not properly released from a property. We're running into issues where there's a break in the chain of title. It doesn't go from A to B to C. We see issues where people had the property in a trust and they took it out to do a refinance and didn't put it back in. But we're seeing lots of competency and power of attorney stuff, which when a property is held in a trust, most trusts don't allow you to use a power of attorney. So if an agent brings us a deal and says, hey, the daughter has the power of attorney over the grandmother, but the property's held in a trust, I first got to see, does the trust allow for that? Because most trusts will say, if grandma's not capable, with a doctor's note or two, then the next person steps up in line. But we see some unfortunate stuff where people bring us a power of attorney and then we start poking around and they're not even part of the trust.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where the checks and balances are of we and title, because ultimately we're on the hook, but that's the due diligence we're doing to make sure. But long story short, with properties that have been owned a very long time and there's been changes of ownership, a lot of times the title and escrow, we need more information so we can get the property in a proper position to be sold to a buyer.
Right. Yeah, there's so many unusual circumstances these days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I had one the other day where somebody, they were on title, married, but they were like, we're separated and it's complicated. Well, you're either married or you're not, and depending on what's going on, these are some of the questions that does this person need to sign? What do we need? So yeah, could almost write a book on kind of a lot of this stuff, but it's fun. Like I look at it, it's almost a puzzle, right? I mean,
Right.
What I like about our business is we're in the business of getting deals closed. We only collect a fee if the deal closes. So, when there's challenging or difficult or complicated ones, it's fun to peel back the layer of the onion to get it in position to where it can sell and the sellers are happy and the buyers are happy. So some of them are a little more work now, but it's also rewarding kind of, fixing it and getting it in position to close.
Yeah, sorting out the
Yeah.
things that have happened in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Even the last couple of transactions I did with you, I can remember as we're talking, one had added a buyer or added an owner sometime a couple of years ago, and they were never really an owner.
There was a
So-
life estate, right?
Yeah, there was a life estate and then also an investment property where they added a partner and then we needed to take them off before selling.
Yeah, I
So,
remember that.
yeah.
And again, so many people, it's in the family. I just add you on a title. It's a handshake deal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as you get to where you sell, sometimes there's additional steps that need to be addressed so the property can be cleanly transferred to the buyer. So,
Right.
yeah,
Yes.
and so
So just cleaning things up. Just like
Yeah.
we clean up a property before
Yeah.
we get it on the market, we also have to clean up the title, right? So what happens if there's a title issue and we've closed? What happens
good
after?
question. So
Yeah.
again, we're issuing this as a one-time insurance protecting the buyer for as long as they own the property. But let's use the example that 3 months post-close, a beneficiary of a trust or somebody comes out of the woodworks and say, hey, I had lent the seller $50,000 or I was supposed to get money and I want to sue the buyer. That's where the buyer, who's really our insured, has the ability to file a title claim. And they say, look, I bought the property, I have a title policy with you, and somebody is asserting this or that. And that's where a claim is filed, and we have huge teams that then get involved, and ultimately our job is to defend the insured. Sometimes they're frivolous claims. Sometimes there's, legitimate things. Title company could make a mistake, pay the property taxes on a wrong property. It's not likely, but it's possible something was missed in the searching process. So that's really why you want title insurance. It's this one-time thing that if anything comes out of the woodworks, you have a place to go to step in and defend, protect, and get to the bottom of it.
Sounds good. And since you brought that up, have you seen an increase in fraud?
blows my mind. Unfortunately, the increase in fraud in the last 3 to 5 years, it's scary. But there's lots of safeguards that the title companies have in place to where, if somebody owns a property for 20 years and they simply just give it to Joe Blow over here, and Joe Blow's trying to sell it, we got to question that. Why did you just give the property? Let's look at the signature. How are things being done? But there's some bad actors out there. A lot of the fraud we're seeing pertains around vacant lots. There's also issues with some notary seals that have been stolen to where, when you sell a property, you got to get something notarized. There are some issues with some notaries out of the country at U.S. consulates and embassies. But the bad actors are always figuring out ways, and they're tending to go after properties that have long length of ownership. Maybe somebody's passed away, but they've held onto the property. And I mean, you wouldn't believe what, we see people forging trust documents, all kinds of stuff. So again, that's probably never going to go away. But we, as the title industry, we have to make sure there's safeguards in place. And and sometimes we even ask the agent, hey, how did you meet the seller, right? I've known the family, I know the sister okay, we're starting to, but we've had deals where an agent goes, I've never met the seller. It was an internet lead. They never want to meet me, and they claim that they're going to be in Italy for the next 4 months, so they want to do like red flag goes up, right? So, but yeah, I think in all industries there's just but man, the stuff. We had one a couple months ago where somebody's email got hacked, and we were provided, because remember, we pay off, right? We were provided a fraudulent demand, and a demand is what we use to pay off a lender. So somebody had intercepted a demand, photoshopped the wiring instructions, but we pay these banks off all the time, and we have a whole payoff department, and luckily the person goes, I know that's not the right routing number for make up the number, but
right.
It's scary.
Wow.
But again, that's why, the process and the checks and balances are so important. And ultimately, we're looking out for the seller and the buyer. But, in certain instances, we have to check some things.
Yeah. So it makes sense to say, do not transfer a property without title insurance.
I would say most people, it wouldn't be if I was a buyer, I wouldn't want to buy a property without title insurance. But if a single woman bought a property and got married 2 years later and wanted to add her husband on the title or put it in a trust, you wouldn't be getting title insurance for that type of thing. What most people don't know is that when you buy a house, you get a title policy. And again, remember I said it lasts for as long as you own the property. But if I buy a property by myself and I, for whatever reason, I want to give it to my brother 5 years from now, if I gift the property to my brother, I have the right to do that. He has the right to receive it. But as soon as I deed the property to my brother, the title policy that was with me goes away.
Oh, I see. Because you're the insured.
Because I'm the insured, and now we're transferring it over. Okay. So we get lots of deals where mom and dad bought it, they end up giving it to the kid. Kid adds husband or wife, goes into a trust. Now they want to sell. So part of what we do in title is we go back, right? And we might, in that instance, go, okay, I know mom and dad bought the property. They probably helped qualify for the loan. But since they gave it away to their kids, which they're allowed to do, we might require, it's called an uninsured affidavit, where basically the parents are signing, we did gift it and we're owed nothing in return. Because we've seen deals in the past where someone goes, hey, I'm going to give you my property, but if you ever sell it, I get half the proceeds.
Oh, right.
I don't want to be on title because I have some problems going on. So these are the questions we ask and some of the safeguards that are in place.
Great. So you protect the public.
We try.
Yes.
One deal at a time. But
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope our audience feels that way as well.
Yeah.
About title, and it's so important. We don't think about it when we fall in love with a house, but what about the legal protections that are in place.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
having me, and you know, it's a treat to work with you, and you really know what you're doing. And if anyone watching has questions about the title of their own property or anything, you can reach out to Nancy, and I'm always here to help.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye.